All right. Go on here. I am a god so godly, embody, spirit and energy. Welcome this entity. I am a god so godly, embody, spirit and energy. Welcome this entity. I am a god so godly, embody, spirit and energy. Welcome this entity. I am a god so godly, embody, spirit and energy. Welcome this entity. Calling my God to the west, taking my body possess, calling my God to the west, taking my body possess, calling my God to the west, taking my body possess, calling my God to the west, taking my body possess, reading the thoughts of my enemies, catch yourself and I know what they meant to be, but I can't ever stop and I won't ever stop, cause I shit is what giving them music, cause this shit is my heart and I love it, it ain't real then I gotta just do it, even knowing I'm living is hell, but I'm going so hard I won't fail, muscle get to flexing, working for a blessing, live on Instagram, Facebook, they mad, they pressing, they reaching, they stretching, I'm living like comfortably, hello pounds to the breeze, hello pounds to the breeze, I am a god so godly, embody, spirit and energy, welcome this entity, I am a god so godly, embody, spirit and energy, welcome this entity, I am a god so godly, embody, spirit and energy, welcome this entity, I am a god so godly, embody, give it a minute. This is a track by one of the artists we had on the Hip Hop and Occult shows, Brother Donald James. Taking my body possess, calling my God to the west, taking my body possess, calling my God to the west, taking my body possess. I done sacrificed hella shit for this shit. Fuck you motherfuckers talking about. We living like gods on this side, you living like frauds on that side. Fuck on my face with that energy. I am a god so godly. Now this was a track. He never gave me a title to this, but you can check him out. He's on SoundCloud. The Heathens. Check him out. He's got a few songs. This was one of the tracks that caught my attention. We do have the Hip Hop and Occult show this Friday night on Live Chaos Facebook. Calling my God to the west, taking my body possess, calling my God to the west, taking my body possess, calling my God to the west, taking my body possess, calling my God to the west, just give it a couple more minutes. I'm gonna play this track one more time, and then I'm gonna go ahead and begin. All right, let me run that one more time. Again, this is Donald James of the Heathens. Run that up, Rico. Again, you can find him on SoundCloud. We had him on, I think it was the second Hip Hop and Occult show. We got this run for another 3 minutes and change, and then we're going to begin. I am a god so godly, embody, spirit and energy. Welcome this entity. I am a god so godly. With a couple greetings while we got some times. Eternal blessings to Ichigo, Separate-Headed Mass, 4777, Creative Ass Tart, shout out to Anthony Footman, Jay Green, and see so forth. We got some questions. We'll get to them in a minute. Let's see, we got questions too. We'll get to that. That's what this session's going to be, Q&A discussion. Working for a blessing, who said that I'm stressing, they mad, they pressing, we got about a minute and a half and we'll have to go. I'm living like comfortably, hello pounds to the breeze, hello pounds to the breeze. I am a god so godly, embody, spirit and energy. Welcome this entity. I am a god so godly, embody, spirit and energy. Welcome this entity. I am a god so godly, embody, spirit and energy. Welcome this entity. I am a god so godly, embody, spirit body possessed, ayy. Calling my God to the west, ayy. Taking my body possessed. I done sacrificed hella shit for this shit. Fuck you motherfuckers talking about. We living like gods on this side. You living like frauds on that side. Fuck on my face with that energy. Ay, yo, I am a god so godly, ay. Embody, ay. Spirit and energy. Welcome this entity. I am a god so godly, ay. Embody, ay. Spirit and energy. Welcome this entity. I am a god so godly, ay. Embody, ay. Spirit and energy. Welcome this entity. I am a god so godly, ay. Embody, ay. Spirit and energy.
Good to see people already got questions in, so we can get right to it. Again, this is Brother Donald James and the Heathens. Check them out on SoundCloud. Support some of these newer artists. Okay. All right. Just a couple quick announcements before we begin. Again, this Friday night, we have the Hip Hop and Occult show on the Primordial Chaos Facebook page. Not here on YouTube. It is on the Primordial Chaos Facebook page. Again, that's so we can play live music. We are going to be doing the Brother Taza put together another great show. We're going to be dealing with the top 10 lyricists of all time, in our opinion, in the hip hop game from back then till present. It'll be a fun show. If that's your thing, I'd love to get you guys feedback on it when we do the show live on Friday. Where, obviously you can't include everybody on that list, but we're going to put as many top MCs that have been in the game on that list. Don't miss that show. That's going to be Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Primordial Chaos Facebook page. All right. Also upcoming for those that are Patreon members. And if you haven't checked out my Patreon page, check it out, patreon.com/Beniti, BANITI. Information's right in the description box here in the video. There's several tiers on there, several different memberships. There's also a mentorship program that I've been letting you guys know about. That is, you can sign up for on the Patreon page. But again, let me put out there, it's only if you're going to want to put in work and going to be serious about it. The mentorship program, basically, I work with you on a step-by-step basis, help and assist you develop your own path, not the path I'm trying to influence you, but for you to develop your own path for self-mastery, showing you all concepts of how to work different forms of black magic, spiritual practices, and for the whole purpose of improving yourself spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and financially. It is work. It is time, energy. And if you're not seriously committed to it, I wouldn't waste your time. I wouldn't want to waste your time, and I wouldn't want you to waste my time. But if you are a sincere person that is looking to really upstep your game, check it out. That might be what you're looking for to give you that jump start, that kick. All right. So again, it's patreon.com/Beniti. We got 2 events coming up for Patreon members only. The Patreon page is where I do private classes, videos, lectures, and rituals only for members. We got 2 events coming up on the 12th and the 26th. We have a class on the 4 anti-worlds and states of non-existence. I'm not going to get into that here, but that's going to be something we're going to be discussing on the 12th. And then we have a ritual where we will be dealing with on the 26th. Again, all that information is on the Patreon page, patreon.com/Beniti. If you need to reach out or connect with me for a spiritual reading or a consultation, again, type of readings that I do offer are clepothic demonic readings, readings with Santa Muerte, aka the Holy Death and the spirits of the dead, or a shadow reading. I want to specify shadow reading is just that. It focuses on personal shit you need to deal with, not for the faint of heart. It can get very intense and personal. If you're looking, because of people always asking, how do I get started? Where do I begin with shadow work, et cetera, et cetera? Well, that's a great place to begin. It'll push you most definitely in the right direction. It'll make you face things that you need to address head on, deal with, et cetera. That is a shadow reading. If you're interested in just a simple consultation, which is different than a reading, you can use that for whatever you want. You can discuss whatever it is you want to discuss. You pretty much dictate how that goes. For either one, shoot me an email, days and times you're available, and most importantly, the time zone that you live in. Also on October, I believe it's the 3rd. Yeah, October 3rd. It's a Saturday. I posted the information. We have a open class. It's on Patreon. It's on posted on the Instagram. The class is open for all to sign up for. The ritual on the 26th is the necromancy rite of Ampu. That is for Patreon members. That's on the 26th. And then we have a class on the 3rd, which I've got to find out. I can't even remember which one that was real quick. Hold on. Give me 1 second. I got like 5 different things going on, and I kind of almost completely forgot about that one. Hold on 1 second. I'll find it right now. Hold on. I'm giving the right date and the information because I'm not sure I'm even giving the right date. Hold on. I don't want to. Okay, it is the 3rd. I just wanted to make sure I was right. So yeah, it is the path of the ancient Egyptian vampire. We're going to be talking about in that class. That is Saturday, October 3rd from 3 to 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be talking about the high aspects or spiritual concepts of Kemetic or Egyptian vampirism. I'm going to go in depth on how to work that path. Again, more from a spiritual perspective. I'm going to kind of explain the different concepts of the vampiric path. There are different paths out there. It's not just one specific. Some gravitate more to a traditional path. Some gravitate more to the modern day concept of what a vampire is. And then there's also the ancient path stuff. And I'll be explaining the different techniques. It is a highly intense path. When we talk about the left-hand path and the occult, it takes a lot of spiritual discipline and mental mind power, right? So yes, that is the 3rd, October 3rd, 3 to 6:30, and that's open for all. You can sign up for it. The class is $55. It can be paid by PayPal. When you send your PayPal payment, please include in the PayPal notes your email address and your name. Again, all the information, everything I just said, all the announcements, it's posted on Primordial Chaos 9 on Instagram, Primordial Chaos on Facebook, and then right here in the community section on the YouTube page here on Primordial Chaos, I post all the announcements. So in case you forget, that's where you can find it, all right? That's pretty much what I got in regards to that. All right, so let's get to it. This is basically open discussion, Q&A. I want you guys to talk to me. What's on your minds? Now, again, title is Occult Left-Hand Path. Everybody has a different perspective on that, a different opinion on what is occult and left-hand path. As we know, the word occult just means hidden. So really, a lot of things can fall under the term occult, or the Greek word, which means hidden. Not a lot fall into left-hand path. There's a lot of shit out there, as I've said over the last couple of years here on the channel, that is labeled, or people title it left-hand path, and I'm sorry to say it's not. In my opinion, when you submerge yourself on this path, whatever you want to, titles you want to give it, the dark side, the left-hand path, chaos magic, many different terms and different spiritual systems that align with the left-hand path. There's a lot of stuff out of there that's fluffy and mixed in and watered down with a lot of that stuff. So I have my own personal concept on it. I'm not saying everybody has to agree with it, but I have to come from the perspective that I identify occult and left-hand path with. I don't mix any of that fluffy shit with it, that new age shit, that, banishing and the high magic and the golden dawn and all that. Not saying that those don't serve some type of purpose, but we need to distinguish the difference between the two. There is a difference, right? So I'm going to go right at the top because it looks like you guys are pouring in with some questions. I'm going to start right at the top and go in order. First, let me say infernal blessings to all. Appreciate everybody showing up here. Let's see what the first question is. All right. So poor 777 typed in earlier. What Kali mantra do you recommend to break an addiction? I've been told Om Kreem Kali. Yes, Om Kreem Kali. That's a good one. There's a couple actually. I've mentioned this book before. A book I'd suggest that can cover whether it's addictions, breaking bad habits, whether you're looking to resolve personal issues, just where any type of energy work that you need to quote unquote manipulate to your benefit. Again, it could be for healing, it could be for finances. I've mentioned the Kali Mantra Magic book by Bal Cadman. He has basically incorporated pretty much all of the major Kali mantras that cover pretty much all aspects of mantra magic. And I think it's a great book. As I've said many times before in the past, Brother Bal Cadman has a great gift of making things very simple for the reader and the practitioner to understand. He's taken them straight out of some of the ancient texts that speak of Kali in the Dravidian culture, or as we know now as the Hindu culture. It's a simple book rather than drive yourself crazy. He's compacted all the major mantras. Now, the only thing I would say about the book, I know and it's just a suggestion. There's stuff in there like per se says do this on this day and that day. I don't really go by that stuff because that's where it can be a little religious, or people can interpret it as religious, and that's not. I know that's not how Brother Bal Cadman meant it to be, but I think again, as an adept, as a master of your path, a god or a goddess, you can work magic any day, anytime. It's just if you understand you have the power and you're in control, and that's the same thing when it comes to astrology. You are not governed to the circumstances of your natal and your birth chart, though that is helpful information. It gives you aspects of what energy you're connected to and working with, but you are not restricted to that. Contrary to some people who use astrology or use it as almost a living day Bible like a Christian does. I don't do that shit. You are the God. You are the one that's always in control. You're the master of your path. Astrological chart doesn't dictate that to you. You dictate the astrological chart. That's a whole nother science. But anyway, all right. So hopefully that helps you with that. Okay, the second question by Sopor. I'm just going in order. That question is going to vary. Your second question is, how do you know when you fully tapped into the archetypes current? Well, that's just going to vary from individual to individual. One, it's going to depend on, how consistent and often you're doing your work. 2, your understanding of the archetype you're working with. 3, what type of ritualistic work you are creating to work with that archetype and what purpose, what's your intent, what are your goals. All those, and there's more. I'm throwing some quick things. All those things are going to factor in. Now, you're not going to just get up one day, engage it, and say, okay, I'm here. How you know is it's just an awareness that will kick in. No, you can't get up and go, oh, I'm here. I've completed this. I've done this. I'm now completely tapped into the energy. You'll know because you'll feel it. You'll see the results in your life. You'll see the things going on around you. And sometimes it's just this clear awareness. It's the frequency and the vibration of the energy from working with the archetype that's running through you. So it's just an instant awareness. You will know. And the only person that can confirm that for you is you. Nobody else can do that for you. So those are the signs or the things you want to start looking for. But a lot of those things are going to factor in. All right. What else we got? All right. Kiona Threadgill says the concept of death. I understand some people see it as 2 deaths, but I see the 3. One that is physical, right? When the fake character and then the real you. Okay. Yes. If we're talking about on a spiritual, mental aspect, I would agree with that. And if that's the way you perceive it or your perspective, that's a good way to look at it, because I always talk about the trinity of self, right? And there's the person that we spend our whole lives trying to be, who we think we are and we're not. There is the person that we try to portray this image or character, how we want people to see us. And then there's the real us. In essence, those first 2 have to die. Now, when you transition it into physical death, you supersede all that, right? Because what's going to happen regardless of the fact, and this is what this path is about, trying to help you understand that Because remember, one aspect on this path, which we refer to as Khepera or Khepera, depending on how you pronounce it, which deals with the Egyptian mysteries and connecting to the eternal word or gift of Set, is coming into the realization of who you really are. That's what Khepera is, or Khepera. Again, different paths pronounce it different based on the spelling. And that is the goal of an initiate on this path, to come into the realization of who you really are, right? And that also will kind of piggyback, if we back up to Sopor's question, when you have or you reach those states of Khepera, that's when you know you're locked in. But yes, you must, if you look at that death through the three, that's a good way to look at it, because you're incorporating the spiritual, the mental, emotional, and then obviously there is a physical death where we go back to the substance, right? Where the spirit, or I should say not the spirit, the soul leaves the body, right? Can't destroy energy. Energy continues to evolve. And when we vibrate at that frequency, and quote unquote, using a terminology that just average person can connect with, and we make that transition to what others call the other side, you see things differently. This is why if you communicate through necromancy rites, through spirits of the dead, whether it's your ancestors, bloodline relatives, or other spirits you connect with, especially those that you knew were alive here, they see things differently. The goal, one thing that's going to happen, you are gonna evolve into who you really are, one way or the other. You could either resist it and mask and hide in other paths that bury it until you don't deal with the real you. Submerge yourself in Buddhism or Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, and just block out the real essence of who you are, where this path does the opposite. It wants you to embrace the very essence of who you are, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, the joyfulness, the happy, all of those things. Because though all those things are you cannot run from those things. And that's how you overcome two of those three deaths that you mentioned in your question. So yes, that's a good perspective or way to look at it. What we got here? All right, so Cheyenne says, what are some energies to keep in mind as we move towards the Day of the Dead into the U.S. elections? All right, good point. Now remember, the Day of the Dead, let's talk about that first, especially if you work any necromancy rites, if you work with the spirits of the dead, Santa Muerte, that's a big energy day for practitioners that work with the Holy Death. Why is it a big day? Because when you have a large group of people on the same frequency and energy, you can make a huge difference in the very magnetic grid of our planet, because it also can affect the energy grid that resides within us, because you can harness and activate a lot of that energy. Now, if one of your goals and focuses on, or your concerns is the upcoming and outcome of the elections, you can use that energy and charge it with your intent of what outcome you're looking to see, okay? But always remember this, regardless of what happens, remember, our first focus is on mastering ourselves and controlling our immediate environment, right? Before we can go outside of that. See, most paths teach this false illusion that we're all going to come together and everybody. That's not going to happen, because most paths don't teach first, because we're no good to nobody else if we haven't gotten our shit together. But you can use that energy, that current, to send an intent out there. It can be effective, because the more people you get on the same frequency and wavelength, the bigger impact you will have. So your approach is key. That's the way you can tap in. And if you're designing specific rituals or rites, especially on the Day of the Dead, which anybody that works with necromancy rites, in my opinion, should be doing, that's where you can use the energy to create whatever influence you were trying to send out there. And it's very powerful. Don't let nobody shit you or fool you. It can become very powerful if done correctly. All right. So again, your approach. It's just all depends on what you got planned as we get closer. And we're only 60 days away from the election or something like that. And don't let them shit you. There's another thing. Let me speak this, not to get into too much politics. Another thing that's important is that census. And let me tell you, a lot of people don't do it, or I was skeptical about it years ago too. You should do at least one in your household, because here's how that works. Your community, or even the city or the state or the neighborhood you live in. For those that don't, they allocate a certain amount of dollars per person. right? And this is why if you look at some inner cities where the school system is bad, that's because a lot of those people didn't do those census, and a lot of those counties and schools and cities don't get the money, right? They do it per capita, per person. And any excess money that's allocated, it's going to go outside of that. That's how that works. I didn't know that years ago, but I found that out not too long ago. And that's important, because this is why you look at some of the schools that we might label in areas that are maybe not the best schools, because they don't have the money and the funds because of that. Same thing with whether it's improvements in the neighborhoods, streets, construction, all of that stuff. Well, we've been programmed to think, don't fill that stuff out. But that's a huge problem. And they don't want you to really focus on that. And in my opinion, it's just as important as a vote. Now, if that's your concern, or one of the things that's on your mind, I would look at both of those things equally if you're going to work any energy towards that, in my opinion. All right. What else we got here? Hold on one second. This thing jumped on me. Okay, here we go. Oh yeah, So Poor 777 says, I was meditating on the demon Abaddon and had a dream that I went to a subterranean prison, and the guard said, get ready to meet your demon. Yeah. You're tapping in, obviously, on some level, and it's personal, but there's definitely a message there for you. Anytime that you're having dreams, visions, or visuals like that, it's definitely symbolic, and it definitely has a personal significance to you. And then what you got to also learn to do, and what everybody needs to learn to do, I think you answered your question, because at the end you say, you tap, don't say you did. You're not guessing, you did. If you get that clear insight or intuition, that's what it is. And we got to learn. I talked about that in the past, to learn to trust. You can call it your intuition, which is just another simplistic way of saying insight from your personal daemon or your higher self. So learn to trust those things. So I think you actually answered the question in your statement. So keep that in mind. Serpent-headed mask. Yes, you can upgrade to tiers. Yes, you can do that on anybody's Patreon page if they have tier levels. You can start out at whatever tier you want, and then there's an option there. Just say a few weeks later, a few months later, you go change tiers. You can just upgrade. Yes, so you can do that. All right. Uptown 157. I have it saved on the Fire Stick. I actually started to watch about 15 minutes of the first episode, and I just got sidetracked with a bunch of stuff. That is the goal. I'm definitely going to try to see if I can get to a couple of the episodes this week. But I have it fired up, ready to go. I just haven't had a chance to watch it. Papa Legba's number is 3, according to tradition. Okay. Any multiples of 3, really, when you work the path. It's not just 3. For example, the opening, sometimes when they're summoning someone saying, I go Papa Legba, they just say it in multiples of 3. Some just say 3. Even when they're shaking the shakir or the rattle, they'll shake it in multiples of 3 when they're summoning it in the spirit. But yeah, it's 3. Again, traditionally from that path. Yes. All right, what else we got? Serpent-headed mask says, when cast in the Hermetic circle, is it something I should be standing physically in, or is it constructing the circle on the altar work the same? You're in the center. There's 2 ways to look at it. You basically, yes, you should be standing physically in the center, and you're creating that circle around you. Now, if you have the opportunity to have your altar centered, which most don't, they have it against the wall. Some will have it out and cast the entire circle around the altar and around themselves. It's more of a mental thing because you're locking in the primordial chaotic energies. And the difference between, say, casting a Hermetic circle as opposed to doing a banishing ritual that they do in traditional magic or ceremonial magic, which we don't really utilize. We're not trying to banish or destroy any energy. So for an example, when you're casting the Hermetic Circle, you're invoking, well, first you invoke the north, south, east, west. But then when you're invoking the triad of light and darkness, you cover all the points in between. You're literally creating an 8-pointed star when you look at how it's cast. So that is creating the circle, really, which is the 8-pointed star of chaos. You are harnessing all of that primordial chaotic energy and locking it into your space. When done correctly, because again, it's more of a mental thing that activates a certain portion of your psyche. When you're doing it, you should be visualizing that space is, you've locked in almost as your own little personal universe, right? So you're actually bringing in the energy, whereas opposed to the banishing ritual of the pentagram, or the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram that people do in traditional magic, they say they're banishing or destroying or removing negative energy. And as I said many times before, that methodology does not apply on this path. There's no such thing. Okay, we understand energy to be just that, energy. Humans classify it based on the vibrational degree of their understanding as being good, bad, positive, negative, whatever terms you use. We look at it that you need all of those energies to be a well-rounded magician, because there are some times where you need aggressive, violent, or intense energies. So they all serve a purpose. So in essence, when you're doing that, you are connecting with all that energy. You're locking it in your space where you have access to tap into whatever aspect of it you need be. When done correctly, I noticed many times when we've done it, whether I've done it individually or we've done it here as a group, there seems to be this very, when right after you cast it, this deep, I don't know how you can describe silence as a sound, but it's a very deep, dark, quiet silence. It's almost as if when the psyche taps into it, as you've opened a porthole, literally, or another dimension in your ritualistic work. So yes, I would look at, or I would approach it. You are standing in the center, and you're creating a circle around you. And majority of it is mental. Remember, if you're using your dagger, or if you have a magical wand or tool that you've charged, when you do it, remember, you're pointing to all the directions. Remember, so you're in the center, and the 8-pointed star of chaos is, you're completely in the center of it. Look at an 8-pointed star of chaos. Look at the point in the middle. That would represent you, and then you're casting the 8, which is all around you, or the chaos that's all around you. But you're in the center. You're in control. That's the best way, in my opinion, to look at the approach when you're doing that in the beginning of a ritual. And again, that hopefully sheds more clarity on the difference between banishing and casting, right? Because you're intentionally bringing that energy when you cast. We're not trying to destroy. All right. All right. Mike's World says, when saying mantras like Val Cadman's, he gives mantras for different problems. Do we just say the mantra and think of the problem? Or is there a way to personalize the mantra for a specific issue? Kind of both. If there's when you're reading the book, for an example, if any mantra, but in this case, since we're talking specifically about Val Cadman's book, yes, as you're doing the mantra, you should be focusing on the intent or the purpose of the mantra. How I find that keeps your mind focused, mala beads, right? Some get a little bit distracted for some reason. If you use the mala beads right, not only does it distract you from not having to keep count, 108, as we know on the mala beads, which really is the number 9, 108 is 9. There's a sacredness in opening up the energy to Kali with that. So I would recommend most mantras, if you can do them, go around the mala beads once. So you don't have to count, have the mala beads. And the mala beads almost create more focus and concentration. And yes, you should be focusing on the specific intent of the mantra. Now, the second part to your question, yes, you can personalize the mantra, because say if it's dealing with a specific problem, well, there's many different problems. So you can personalize it because you can focus on, let's just say, a specific problem in detail that you're dealing with, right? Whereas, yes, when you're reading the book, it's saying these mantras are in general for this problem or in general for that problem. But you can customize it because let's say you're dealing in detail with a specific situation. You can focus on that specific situation, whether it's something personal, whether it's something with an individual, whatever it may be. So most definitely you can personalize it and make it specific. I would actually recommend that. Okay. I'm not sure I read that book, the referring to his Vashik Chiron. I don't know if I have that one. It doesn't ring a bell. All right. So this question is by Ichigo Uzumaki. Question: I'm super scatterbrained and all over the place. Where would you suggest I start and focus on as a beginner? That's a good question. One, you definitely want to get the scatterbrainness under control. It could be a good and a bad thing. Good because it keeps you inquisitive and open to seek knowledge. Bad, but when you can't make some personal order out of that for your benefit. Always begin, in my opinion, with shadow work. That's always where you want to begin. If you're on this path, again, not everybody that says they're on this path are on this path, but if you're on this path, the best place you want to start is shadow work. You really need to understand yourself, the good things about yourself and the bad things, and you need to address them. Good places to start are using different alchemy or dark, as I like to call dark alchemy techniques. 2 books I would suggest that are good to start with that and understanding that. One, it's I've mentioned this book many times over the last few years. The Emerald Tablets of Tahuti, Alchemy for Personal Transformation by Dennis William Huck, H-A-U-C-K. H-A-U-C-K, first name Dennis, middle name William. And then obviously the Kabbalion by the 3 Initiates, not the Kabbalah, the Kabbalion, the Hermetic Principles of Tahuti, the 7 Hermetic Principles of Tahuti by the 3 Initiates. The reason why those 2 books are good foundational pieces, one, the 7 Hermetic Principles will help you really understand mentally and spiritually how magic works just by going through them. So I would start there because that's the groundwork. And if you don't have that foundation or that groundwork, again, yeah, you might read and explore a lot of things. But again, my thing I've been saying from day one, going 20 plus years back, what good is knowledge if you can't apply it consistently? Then it's just information. The difference of what we do on this path is we apply the knowledge we learn. We don't just read. We don't just store it in our mind and regurgitate it when it's convenient. We try to the best of our ability to apply it consistently on a daily basis. And that's how you kind of destroy that scatterbrainness that you're talking about, or lack of focus. Okay. All right. All right. It was a good question by Serpent Headed Mask. It says, do you create your own invocations when working with certain deities or systems? So far, I'm not sure what else to do in ritual besides invocations. I have in books, which I'm sure I'm limiting myself. You should create your own invocations or change the wording around and customize it to your personal use for what you're doing. There's different things you can do in rituals. It just depends on what kind of ritual you're working. It's not just invocations. You could be working with black mirrors. You could be doing mantras. You could be some rituals are pure mental and they involve intense visualizations. It just depends on what you're doing. Invocations usually are incorporated in most rituals because that is the key point of the ritual. Because when the invocation obviously has root in the word to invoke, because you're trying to invoke or connect with the energy. But the ritual shouldn't just be invocations. Now I know most of the rituals that I work with either privately or with people that are in the classes or on the Patreon page or people that have done rituals with us live here, we incorporate all the elements for the most part that I mentioned: meditations, mantras, visualizations. And then sometimes there's physical aspects or challenges to the rituals. So it just depends on what you're doing. Now, as far as, like you say, it's okay. Again, it's okay to use invocations from books, but that shouldn't be the only thing that you're doing. And you should be making some adjustments there. So if that's the only thing you're doing, then yeah, you might want to look at that. And be a little bit more creative, because I've always said for many years now, don't limit yourself by mimicking or copying other people's rituals. All right, so there's somebody. This is a good comment. I got somebody on the Facebook. Said, I did shadow work. I'm 3 years in with the spiritual side. Well, I had to throw that in because it's what people need to do. And it is. It's true. You have to do it, especially out the gate. There's no getting around it because, again, the old adage in alchemy and mysticism, know thyself and thou shalt know the gods. So how can you work and connect with any of these energies, archetypes, spirits, demons, if you don't even know yourself? And I've said that for years. This is why people struggle out the gate, because yes, you might jump into something. I'm not saying you won't get some results, but I guarantee you the consistency of it isn't going to be there. Okay. You need to understand self first before you can proceed forward. Look, it's not, you don't have to, you can do whatever you want. I'll make that clear. But I'm telling you, if you want a formula that's going to be more grounded and solid, that's the way to go. Highly recommended. Okay. What else we got? There's a good question by Sopor777. Does our belief in the power of the mantra give it power, or does it have power in its own right? It's, again, combination of both. Okay. It only has power in its own right of what it represents. But the power doesn't come to life or substance unless your belief, your personal belief, not religious belief. Let me stress that, because there is religious belief, which is belief in things not seen, proven, or confirmed. And then there's personal belief. So yes, your personal belief gives it the fuel and the fire needed. So as long as you understand that, you'll be right on. Excuse me, 1 second. All right. Sorry about that. All right. So hopefully that answers the mantra question. All right. The next question from Liz. So if all the energies we work with are us, how can things get out of control? Example, working with Kali can cause destruction. How if we are the energy that confuses me? Well, there's two ways to got to look at that. You are the energy because, one, remember, whether it's Kali, whether it's Set, whether it's Sekhmet, any deity, archetype, you're accessing that. I've said this many times before, and I know you've actually been in some of the classes. There is an external aspect of this because when it manifests outside of self, it has its point of origin in the mind. You're accessing the energy in your psyche. Because look at it this way. You got to look at this two ways. Did Kali exist before anybody even introduced the concept of Kali to you? Now, be careful when anybody answers that question because you could set yourself up, okay? You can say no in the sense that you didn't know because you weren't aware. So don't confuse with not knowing or being aware with the existence of it, because these energies or spirits, or demons, archetypes, whatever we refer to them as, they are energy, and they have really, you can't really trace point of origin, especially the Klopathic demons. And I know people try to do it in grimoires, ancient texts, etc. Now, how it can go astray is where, if you're tapping into Kali, this is where it can go astray, because if you are in a bad state of mind, say you're stressed out, say you're dealing with bipolar or mental issues, okay? Since you're the facilitator, if you're invoking or accessing or connecting with the energy of Kali, and you unlock that energy in your psyche, and you're not mentally stable, it can go astray because the changes that you are going to go through or experience, you may not be in the correct mental state of mind to be prepared to receive them. And what do I mean? In what shape, form, or fashion? Well, if Kali's the great bringer of change, okay, so your things can get turned upside down: relationships, business, career, money, finances, and let's just say you're not in the right frame of mind or right position to deal with that at the moment, for a multitude of reasons. So this is what it means when the energy can go astray, because it can cause destruction, because it's not that the fact that you need to be confused in understanding that it can go astray, because simply, again, when you're working with that energy, if you're not prepared for the change, if you're not prepared, most people on the surface think they are. And I've seen this happen many times before. It'll never go wrong. It'll never get out of control, and it'll never be beyond your understanding as long as you have a clear insight of what can happen and what will happen to some degree, right? It's about change, and the purpose of working with any of these spirits or demons or gods or goddesses or archetypes, whatever we call them, is because we're trying to bring some type of transformational change. So what transformation, for an example, we're using Kali, what transformational change are you trying to bring about within the self if I'm working with Kali? And if you have a thorough understanding, let's say, in this case, we're talking about Kali, then you don't have to worry about that. It goes astray because, remember, it's your mind that's you're tapping into, and you're absorbing, you're absorbing energy, and you're giving energy out. So this is why I've said for many years, it's important on this path to a certain degree to be in a sound mind and a sound body. This is why you might hear over the years from different teachers and people that have been on this path, where they talk about some of the dangers of mental instability. And again, it's not set to scare people, but if not in a sound mind, sound body, a lot of things can go a little haywire. This is what we call, whether we call it psychiatric issues, because we see when some people hit a certain, let's take somebody who they classify has split personalities or hears voices. And what happens is you tend to open up doorways and gateways. Now, keep this in mind. This is I'm going to give you the detailed answer to this. And it's a good question. Remember, if we understand what we call our aura, right? We always hear people in many paths over the years talk about your aura, right? In the East, they call it the halut, right? It gives off a color, right? Anybody that studied basic information on aura knows if we talk about these demons and spirits being beings of light and energy, well, they're attracted to the light that you give off, right? And where does that light come from? Well, it comes from everything that you got resonating, going on within, from Kundalini energy or lack of, how the chakras are actually functioning correctly, is all going to determine and affect what type of aura you give off. Now, even as I said, there's an external experience to this. People talk about, I did a ritual, I had a dream, or I had a vision, or I was in meditation, and one of these demons or gods appeared to them. Well, what I'm trying to tell you is you attract that energy. Why I say it has its point of origin in the mind and it's within us is you send out the energy or the light to draw that being or archetype in. You can't do it unless you learn the discipline from doing it within. This is what I mean when I say all that has its point of origin in the mind. All is mental. Mental is all. The universe is mental because you have to tap into it first here. And when your halut or aura is giving off a certain light, energy, and frequency, and I like to use the word frequency and vibration, it attracts these spirits and demons like magnets. Now, what tends to happen is when you're vibrating at the correct frequency, the crown chakra opens. And this is why I say a lot of people that say my crown chakra is open, I kind of laugh because it's not. They confuse that for feeling maybe pieces or moments of bliss, and they think their crown chakra is open. You'll know when your motherfucking crown chakra is open. Trust me when I tell you that shit. You will know beyond the shadow of a doubt. You won't speculate, you won't assume. When the crown chakra opens, due to the light and energy you're giving off, and certain demons or beings or spirits or archetypes see it, they're attracted to it, you can open yourself up for walk-ins or what we call spiritual possession, right? We hear people talk about being possessed by the spirit, right? They say in a lot of African spiritual traditional paths, I was mounted or possessed by the spirit. I don't like to really use the word possessed because it has religious connotations in it. So when you open yourself up, you can be susceptible to walk-in spirits. And sometimes you open, as they say, Pandora's box and you can't close it. And sometimes when that spirit finds the opening and works its way in, you may not be prepared to harness the energy of that spirit. So what tends to start happening is you might start hearing voices, personality disorders. It starts to trickle and disrupt into all aspects of your life. You tend to become maybe aggressive and argumentative with people. Your performance in your career and your job starts to go down, your family life, all that. I'll just give you an example. This is why we say that it can run amok. So I hope that gives you a better understanding. I mean, there's more to it. I'm just trying to give you the quick access to understand it. It's a very good question. But remember, what you're doing in here internally, the work you're doing on yourself internally is going to determine what you connect with and attract. And you have to be prepared with that energy you're going to connect with. And that's all simply saying in simplistic terms, some aren't. And then when that happens, that's when shit can get a little bit haywire. We've seen it. I've seen people over the years start working. I watched a dude, for an example, years ago. I mentioned this back in '97. And there was a shamanic African witchcraft drumming on the beach. To this day, dude's fucked up. He tapped into some shit at that event and was never the same. And he was kind of all over the place before that. He was dabbling, and he wasn't dabbling safely, in my opinion. When I say safely, he wasn't dabbling with a good understanding of what he was doing. So one, it starts with your understanding. Do your due diligence, do your homework, do your research. Don't just do shit because you like it. I mean, people do shit. A lot of people do shit on this path because, I'm so fascinated with, Sekhmet. And I've always said, for an example, Sekhmet. I've seen Sekhmet fuck. You talk about fucking people up. That can be, to me, even more intense than Kali, if you really understand Sekhmet. But hopefully that gives you a little more insight. All right. All right, so Keona says, this was something I was going through and experienced, but the most terrifying feeling is being conscious of the fact you're on autopilot for a large part of your and yet don't know how to get out. Yes, in the beginning, it can feel and seem like that. But you know what? That's part of the process because, that's part of the process because remember, when you work and connect with a lot of these energies, you go into the unknown. The abyss, the darkness, the void, where there is no boundaries, there's no limitations, no parameters, there's no roadmap on really how to navigate through. And most need to experience that to a degree, that feeling of hopelessness, because it deprograms the illusionary consciousness that we've been given to us over the years. And sometimes it puts into question a lot of the things we thought we knew. And that you need to experience that to a certain degree, because that's how you know that's really tapping into the edges of the void, right? So yes, it can definitely seem like that in the beginning, but it should, right? Because remember, this path is about, it's almost that, what that reminds me of is the concept of going through a Masonic initiation. And let me tell you why. Anybody that's been through a Masonic lodge, or even if you're a sister and been through the Eastern Star, you know, when you enter the Blue House, and on the first 3 degrees, whether it's entered apprentice, fellowcraft, master mason, but let's the entered apprentice degree, you're divested of all metals. You're stripped down basically. They'll leave a pant on with one leg rolled up, breast bare, shirt. It's symbolic of you're pretty much stripped of all your belongings. You're blindfolded and put into complete darkness. So you're divested of anything that's valuable, any metals. You're blindfolded, you're stripped, and then you're put out into the lodge in darkness. There's a reason for that. The reason for that is to strip you of everything, to make you feel like you have nothing, that you're almost hopeless and despair, and now you're expected to go blindfolded in the darkness through some type of trial and tribulation. That's in essence a short summarization of the beginning stages of this path that we all have to experience to some degree. When I look back now, and what you just said kind of ignited it, I look back on my Masonic rituals and degrees that I went through years ago, but I have a different perspective on them now, because now I go back and revise them in my mind through an occult or left-hand path perspective, and it takes on a whole different meaning. So you will eventually get out through consistency. It starts to change and evolve as long as you don't run in fear from it, as long as you embrace it, as sometimes as out of whack as it might seem, or crazy or tough to deal with. That's the challenge. Some work through it, some don't. All right. Cinnamon and Sage, this question. How do you deal with physical pain when you are connecting with the current, i.e. body pain, dizziness, headache, etc.? Man, it's funny you bring it up. We just did a whole class on that a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about working certain currents, okay? Working with certain spirits and demons. It is normal sometimes. Now, I want to touch on 2 things, especially in the beginning or the early stages of working with some of these archetypes. Some of the things that you describe, body pain, dizziness, headache. Remember, you're affecting the Kundalini energy that runs through your body. It can offset and create a lot of those physical ailments you described. Now, the crazy thing as far as how you deal with it, there's a couple of ways. One, take note or be aware specifically when it happens and what energy or archetype you're working with. Because that's important telltale sign. 2, take note of when you're working with that archetype, what is it you were doing when you were working with that archetype? So that will help in the beginning to identify what could be the root cause of why that's happening to you. 2, what will eventually happen, the body, when you're working with these energies, you're bringing great, tremendous, stressful change spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically upon yourself. And sometimes it's just as simple as an X amount of time going by. It does subside, and sometimes just on its own. Once you get used to working with the current, it does over a period of time start to subside on its own. Now, I would say this, though. We talked about this in that class that we did on this a few weeks back. Now, if this is happening consistently all the time for long periods of time, then there's something else you might have to look into. There's something else going on. I'm not just talking about medically. There could be also something going on spiritually that you need to reevaluate and try to identify. So it shouldn't be happening all the time for a long period of time. That's not normal, okay? But you'll find, regardless, even if you're a seasoned practitioner on this path, you could be practicing this path for 15, 20 years. You're going to go through periods of that, off and on. It's part of the process. There's a section actually in the Draconian Ritual book, Kundalini energy, and it talks about everything you're talking about, working with these spirits. Why do we go through some of the effects that you're describing? A lot of it, again, has to do with connecting with these spirits. A lot of it has to do with the work that you're doing specifically with these spirits. And this is going to create some of the signs that you describe. So it's a combination of all those things. The headache and the dizziness, I can definitely attest to, and the body pain to a certain degree. The headaches is something I will get off and on for years. And again, I'm going to tell you this from experience. It's not something that will go away completely. It's not something that will be around all the time. You will see, again, there'll be periods where you deal with it, all right? So hopefully that helped. All right, hold on. Let me reboot this. Post this shit. Hold on one sec. I'll do it later. I'm just going to post one video. It's going to be live on Facebook and YouTube now. All right. So hopefully that helps. Set go. Right now, rituals again if you go to the Patreon page, tiers 3, 4, and 5 are able to virtually participate in the rituals. We do live rituals here in South Florida, but obviously we stopped them due to the pandemic. We only do it in a very small group of us here now. We do plan on, as things are improving, and they are here, and in a lot of places, we will restart those up. So you could always stay in contact through email. But direct participation for the moment now, the best way to do that as far as rituals is through the Patreon page, either tier 3, 4, or 5. Will give you access to the actual rituals. All right. Keona says, let me hold on. Damn, shit skipped on me. My bad. Hold on. All right, here we go. Keona says, continuation of last comment. It's like once the fake character is dead, some residuals are still left where one still at time mimics the fake dead character from my perspective. Yes, because that's the ego, right? There's good and bad aspects to your ego, right? Your ego is good in the sense that it protects you, right? Your ego is good. It's good to have a certain level of confidence, which some sometimes interpret as arrogance. But your ego can be fucked up where through your insecurities or sometimes your fears, your ego will latch on to what it's comfortable with. And sometimes it'll mask itself and hide behind, as you describe, a fake character. Yes, and that's the challenge of this path. Even though we put some of them to rest, certain situations tend to bring it back out, right? And that's when when you're growing on the path, you recognize it and you put it to sleep. Okay? Well, good point. Soulpar 7 says, is existence basically a condensed thought of some higher intelligence / the all? That's a good point, because existence means to just be. What is to be? Right? Some people get a little confused from that statement. To exist is to be. What is to be? To be is to exist. I know that sounds like a bunch of jibber jabber, right? When you're talking about the concept of all in quantum physics, right? They say all in all. You can't take from the all and you can't add from the all, right? That's what they teach in quantum physics and metaphysics. Where would you get it from and where would you put it? Really, the science of the all is the square, right? You're opening up a lot of Masonic shit, right? And Masonic brothers will say, I'm standing firm on my square, right? Are you standing firm on your square, right? You can look at it, and I don't know if your perspective, as you describe, as a condensed thought of some higher intelligence, the all, I would say you only, as a mortal, we would use the word condensed because we have to put it in a perspective where we can connect with it. But existence is just that. I don't think you can condense it. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a condensed thought. Individually, it can be, yes. But as in its totality, this is what we call the collective consciousness, right? We all can tap into it individually in a condensed aspect, but collectively, it just, to exist is to be, right? Real existence, and it's funny you bring that up. I'm getting ready to do, here goes something deeper. I'm not going to get into that now because of time. I'm going to be talking about that on the Patreon class on the 12th. The 4 non-worlds and non-existence. Is there such thing as non-existence? Right? Because how can existence be? And then there's non-existence. But because now here comes something a little bit more, might sound a little more confusing. In order for it to have existence or being, you must have non-existence, right? So in order to have something, and look at the play on words in English, something, SOMETHING, and then the word we used to sum something, SUM, the sum of the thing, you must have nothing, right? No, NOTHING, no thing. So in order to have something, you must have nothing first. Think about that for a minute. This is why I'm trying to say, I wouldn't necessarily say it's just a condensed thought of some higher intelligence. It is when you individualize it. So when each individual tries to put it into perspective, or as you described, condense it, yes, in that sense, because that's what we have to do individually to have a certain understanding of it. But collectively, it takes on a whole nother aspect. So hopefully that helps. All right. L3 says, also, is Papa Legba an aspect of Lucifer? Yes. You can synchronize him with many aspects of, they call him, because remember, Mephistopheles is called the trickster, right? One aspect of Legba, they refer to him, and again, I talked about this not too long ago, not a trickster in the sense that harm is going to come upon you, but the trickster in the sense that you will be challenged. You will be faced situations and scenarios to try to bring out that God or goddess in you. Now, can you get hurt or fucked up in that process if you don't understand it? Most definitely. So they refer to him as the trickster in one of his names or titles because there's going to be challenges laid in your path. So if you say you're about that life or that path, as we like to say, and I say this, that's why this path is different than any other path, because see, other paths, you can put on the jewelry and the clothing and have the lingo down pat, Alafia, Ashe, Hotep. You got the garb all down pat. You're playing the part, right? You can't do that on this path. If you say you're about this path, I keep telling you, there will come a time where you will have to show, prove, and demonstrate your power as a black magician. Trust me when I tell you, it's not a matter of if, it's not a matter of when, it's just a matter of knowing it will happen. Okay? Because when, you'll know. If is out the box. That's the difference. And we need to understand that. So yes, when we look at Papa Legba from this path, we definitely can say he's definitely a mask of the adversary. Because again, I would liken him to Mephistopheles, the mask of Lucifer, known as Mephistopheles, who is the ultimate trickster. Very similar characteristics as Papa Legba, right? Almost personification, and the way it's described is very similar. So I would definitely look at it. And then even when you look at the colors of Legba, red and black, the 2 key colors we use on the occult that are attributed to the various adversarial currents, whether it's Lucifer, Satan, any of the masks that we talk about. So it's definitely a connection there. That's how we would look at it from a left-hand path perspective. And even in the traditional systems, they'll say, Lucifer, Papa Legba or Legba is the trickster, or they refer to him as the devil, right? And when people hear the word devil, it automatically conjures up religious definitions. And then they get spooked out if you don't have an understanding of this path, all right? So, but yes, the answer to your question is yes. Michael says, do you have a tip for increasing one's clairaudience in order to communicate with spirits? Well, step one, you must be disciplined in your approach and work consistently with whatever spirit you're trying to communicate with. That's step one. Specific tips, right? One good thing is I find if you can find a good mantra that carries the right vibrational frequency with the spirit, it can open up that communication. Another good tip is, for an example, with Azazel, scrying is a great way to communicate, enhance your clairaudience and overall communication with spirits, whether it's all the senses, seeing, hearing, feeling, and scrying through the elements. I'm using the Azazel as an example because using fire, water, air, or smoke, you can use these as gateways to making the spirits manifest and as a tool of communication. I mean, literally scrying through the fire with Azazel, you can, actually get answers to questions via a voice or some type of reaction through the elements. So communication as a whole, there's many deviation things you can use. Another great way I found is doing meditations and focuses and visualizations through the black mirror. That is one of the best ways, in my opinion, because the black mirror, again, almost acts as a porthole or a gateway, for lack of another word, to another dimension, abode, or realm. So yes, there's many things you can do. I would try some of those. And it will help with the clairaudience, but it will help overall communication, period. All right. All right. King Musa, Shrine of Modern Mystics, peace, brother. You help free many minds from the spell of true sleep. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, brother. Appreciate the comment. So poor 777 says, being on this path has made me more self-contained, and the desire for companionship has been obliterated, and at least the neurotic need for another person is gone. Well, that's the isolated consciousness, right? Tapping into, when you separate from all conformist ways of thinking, and I'm just saying in this case, as you described, the need for another person, right? As I said many times before, most of us feel the need on that level to be connected with another person because most people fear being alone or dying alone. That's a reality. Trust me when I tell you. Some people don't realize it on the surface, but that's the reality. Now, if you've come to that realization, where you're at in your path, that's something for you in your personal growth. And, that's what it is. But when you tap into what we call the isolated consciousness of the adversarial mask of Lucifer as Set, that's when you have reached a plateau or a peak in your understanding that it all starts with me and it all ends with me. Not ends in the sense that there's a finality to what we call existence. We know that the start and the ending, we go through many deaths in this existence. Right? We die many spiritual deaths in this existence. So anytime you're growing on your path, think about, reflect back, everybody in here, regardless of where you're at now, if you're on this path, reflect back where you came from. So if you left Christianity and transitioned into another spiritual path, you died a death spiritually. You died one existence and you have now transitioned to another. If you left spirituality and let's say you went into Ifa, and then you left Ephra and came into this, you died another existence, right? Always look at it as that starting point and ending point. When we look at it on that level, that's important because when we tap into that isolatedness as you're describing, right? You're not only going to see companionship being obliterated, you're going to see a bunch of shit that's not necessary for you anymore being eliminated or obliterated. That could be people. That could be there might be certain things you used to do that you're not interested in doing no more. Might be certain behaviors or characteristics that you just don't feel the need to even indulge in anymore. And then vice versa. You might take on a bunch of new things that you never thought you would have taken on before, or opened your doors or your mind to experimenting with things you never thought you would have maybe years prior to that. So all that is showing is the great inner transformation and change that's going on within. What ignites that? The understanding of working this path. This is why we study. This is why we do rituals. We don't just do rituals just to do them. There has to be an intent behind the ritual. Why are you working a ritual? What is your intent to go to your chamber room and work a ritual? Is it in line and in accordance with your needs? And are you reaching too far? If it's not a need and it's a want, are you reaching too far outside the spectrum? Is it practical? And I said this many times before. Let me give you an example. You can't be a gold Grammy Emmy awarding singer and doing rituals because you want to be a gold platinum selling R&B singer, but you ain't got no fucking talent. That's not practical. So that's a want. This path deals with first shaping and getting in line all your needs. What are some of your needs? Well, you might have a bad fucking temper that you need to work on. You might be shitty with spending money that you need to learn to discipline yourself, right? You might constantly make the bad choice to get into horrible relationships. These are aspects too. There's identification there with shadow work, but these are things we want to address first before we start working for the financial things. And yes, you should work for those things. And your knowledge and your wisdom should give you the ability to obtain those things. But I always look at the symbolic parable of Solomon, right? Solomon was given the opportunity by the biblical God to what? He got anything he wanted. He could have said, I want all the gold and riches of the planet. What did he ask for? He asked for the knowledge and the wisdom first, right? And what does their own Bible tell them in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33? Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all things will be added unto you. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his kingdom and his righteousness, and all things will be added unto you. Look at that from an occult left-hand path perspective, not from a spooky Christian perspective. And I tie that quote, even though that's in Matthew, I tie that quote to look at what Solomon did. Because Solomon knew if you had knowledge, and I keep telling people this, if you have knowledge of self first, all things will be added unto you. The nice car that you're looking for is going to come. Trust me when I tell you. The house or your living situation that you're looking to improve is going to come. The better job or career opportunity is going to come. Why? Because you seek first knowledge of self. Whereas some people make the mistake to come on the path and they start doing sex magic and money magic rituals and all this other shit. Yeah, and they might get little moments, bits and pieces here and there, getting some results. I'm not saying they won't, but it's almost like the crackhead that takes the hit from the crack pipe. Once the high wears off, they get fucked up. And that's what happens to a lot of these people. They get moments and periods of taste of success with this, but when it crashes, they fall hard and then they don't know how to deal with it. It becomes too overwhelming for them. That's the point. You got to be well-rounded in your understanding of what it is you're doing. And you have to understand, is this molded around my needs? Right? And if you address knowledge of self first and your needs, I guarantee you the other shit will fall in line. Not spooky, and it's just going to happen. And no, it's because you're doing what you need to do to get self right. Know thyself, and thou shalt know the gods. If you don't know yourself, you can't. It's just impossible. All right. What else we got? Serpent-Headed Man says, you mentioned charging of daggers, /athame, or wands. What procedures do you do to charge these items? Well, first and foremost, any ritualistic or magical tools are personal to a magician, and they should be charged with your personal energy. They should be very sacred to you. And two, you shouldn't have any other people touching them or playing with them or creating any conflicting energy with them. Step one, anytime you buy these, I don't care where you get them from, whether it's online, I don't even care if you get it from an occult store, you always want to do your basic cleaning to them. You want to remove all the vibration and energy from everything else that touched it before it got into your hands. That's step one, removing the energy and the vibration off it. How you do that is basically very simple. You can use blends of sea salt water. Some like to use mixture of sea salt water, Florida water. Do your basic wiping down and cleaning of it. Some even like to use a blend of olive oil or natural olive oil and add it to the mix. Some even use rubbing alcohol, and that's fine too. That's very potent to removing the vibrations. Once you've done your basic cleaning, then you want to now charge it smudge it and charge it with your energy. So for an example, after I've done the basic wiping down, for the actual charging ritual, I like to use just plain sea salt and water and a good resin incense. Okay, not stick, not cheap incense, dragon's blood, frankincense and myrrh, rock incense that you burn on a charcoal, something that's going to give you a good thick, blend of smoke that you can smudge the ritualistic tool. So how you charge it after you sprinkle it with your sea salt and water, you want to create your own personal invocation, or a clear, concise statement of what you're using the tool for, right? For an example, let's say we're using a ritual dagger or an atheme or a wand. You want to say, I charge this as you're smudging it. I'm saying you're holding it and you're focusing on the tool. I'm charging this atheme or wand with my magical energy. Every time I use this wand or use the whatever implement or tool that you're using, may it be charged with my own personal power and energy, and may it connect me to any of the spirits or demons that I'm working with. And you can name specific. I'm just giving you a general format. You want to connect the ritual tool with your personal work and what you're going to connect it with. You do that as you're smudging it, charging it. You want to hold it and focus as it's being charged over the smoke. That's when you want to put that personal intent in there. So you definitely should do that. You should always look at your ritualistic tools as very sacred. They're your armor. They're your weapons, right? And that atheme, for an example, or wand, that is a magical implement, especially if you're using it to cast a hermetic circle. You're sending that power. Visualize that atheme being charged with that primordial chaotic energy that you use to work your rituals, but you're the conductor and the facilitator of it. So yes, definitely want to make sure you do that. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on one second. All right. Sorry about that. What else we got? All right, take a few more here. Science, agrees with the 7 hermetic principles are a great place to start. Goddess Incarnate says, regarding working with the energy streams, how do you know if you're working with the subconscious mind or the unconscious mind? What is the difference? Are they the same? No, they're very different. Remember the unconscious mind and the subconscious, right? And then some people also refer to an aspect called the super conscious, right? Whether they now again, remember, these are terms that spiritualists will use, or even psychologists will use, and Jung used these a lot in his work. Now, remember, the unconscious is connected to the superconscious because there are always things or forces at play going on unconsciously that you're not aware of. Now, the subconscious mind is usually the one that's dictating to the conscious or the aware self, right? And sometimes when we're just tapping into what's being programmed into us consciously, we tend to not be able to connect to what people are calling the unconscious. It's only unconscious or unknown because people will use terms that we're asleep or we're not woke, we're not aware. Why are we not aware? We can even connect that into when people talk about calcification of the pineal gland, right? When the pineal gland is activated, it connects you to a certain awareness. It connects you to certain things that people label quote unquote unknown or unconscious. So what changes us, it gives us the ability to access the unconscious mind, right? Is understanding, for an example, how you activate the pineal, understanding how calcification is a tough thing or process to understand, to eliminate, but it can be done. What causes the calcification, or what causes us not to be able to tap into the unconscious mind, right? Well, all the things that alchemy teaches us that make us dense, right? Everyday stress, problems, financial things. Can't rule out the physical things: diet, food, lack of exercise. All of these key components play things that disconnect us from the unconscious. And really, the unconscious is a very polite way of saying the spiritual realm. I'm just going to say something very simple. Now, why is that? Why am I saying that? Because this realm that we call the spiritual abode, as I said before, right? We're tricked with the whole concept as above, so below, as within, so without. It doesn't exist. That's why they're saying it. They're not saying it because, as people say it, as above, so below, like as in heaven, so on earth. It's not what it means. As within, so without. There's only within, right? You see, the Baphomet symbol was alluding to, and I showed people this a few weeks ago. When you see Baphomet in this position, there's another position they don't show you. They show you in alchemy with his two hands out, and then you bring him in. Let's go into the heart chakra, right? As above, so below, as within, so without, but there's really only within, because these planes are interwoven around you. They're not above there, right? We think of the spiritual abode as somewhere up there. We know that these are just vibrational planes of frequency that are interwoven around us. And again, I've mentioned many times over the years, liken it to the Matrix movie was trying to show you that. And they were right when they had that part, right? So we got to see, we don't see it because we've made ourselves so dense and disconnected from that based on what's programmed into our conscious minds. What's programmed into our conscious mind? Well, it starts from birth, right? We're programmed to accept a certain religion, a certain culture, way of life, or we might have been brought up in a certain tradition. Then it goes even further in that we get indoctrinated. Then we go through the educational system, and then most times through a religious system. Right? All of this puts the conscious on the surface. The subconscious, which connects you to the unconscious, we can't receive the correct messages. All of those things, then the physical part, then we start eating the wrong foods. We don't exercise. We don't take care of ourselves to the best of our ability. This all has an effect. So they say, well, the unconscious mind, that's just a polite way of saying shit you don't know or you're not connected to anymore because you're asleep, right? The Egyptians rephrased it as the mummy. Rise, ye mummies, out of your slumber and sleep, right? You see that in some of the texts. Awake and rise, ye mummies, out of your slumber and sleep. It's talking about a mental sleep. A lot of us have been put to sleep mentally, and it started years ago. But you see it's changing now, right? For on a multitude of levels. I'm not talking about some of this physical change you see going on the surface, but it's a new day and time, okay? So no, they are not the same. Are they connected? Yes. So some might think they're the same because there is a connection. They all kind of piggyback off each other and they have a function as far as the connection, but they are different. They do have a different purpose, or they do represent different things, all right? Serpent-headed mass says, the sigil I found that represents Set also represents Sitri. That's a good point. As different entities / gods, how are they related in use of the same sigil? Well, that's a good point because, for an example, you can look at Papa Legba's sigil, right? You can look at Santa Muerte's sigil. They look very similar, right? You can look at any sigils, even even with some of the, well, you can look at that two ways, but even Byron Samdi, anytime you see the four ways or the crossroads, right? You'll see this with a lot of deities. Again, Papa Legba, and I use Santa Muerte. Your reason why you might see similar sigils and how they are related, because the energies are similar. And I use the Santa Muerte and Papa Legba because they're gateway road opener deities. So you might see the similance in the sigils because the energy is very similar and it's connected, right? So that's how I would look at that and approach it. They are related as far as because they might have similar representation of the energy. Again, Papa Legba and Santa Muerte are gateway deities. They are gateway openers, right? So you will see that with quite a few of the sigils from different paths or different spiritual systems that they look very similar. You'll find that pattern. You'll see that consistency. All right. All right. Peace to Joe Gardens. Hello to Brian Gerard. Eric Morris, what's going on, brother? Infernal blessings. Go. That's brother Eric, brother E. Hopefully things, I know we talked not too long ago. Hopefully things are starting to improve, man. I know you said you possibly at some point take another trip back down here, man. Good to see you here, brother. Anthony Footman says, how important is practicing semen retention when it comes to manifestation? Does semen retention amplify one's manifestations? Yes, when you are working sex magic, okay? Because the more retention, now let me be clear. I don't want nobody straining themselves and busting their nutsack and their balls. But if you have the discipline and the power to retain, especially to hold back, whether you're doing individual sex magic or with a partner, the more you can retain and discipline and hold back, it charges the semen with more energy. So then when you release, let's say you're doing a magical ritual for a specific intent, and at the time of release is when you're supposed to focus on the intent. So if you're doing a ritual, like I did one years ago, that I needed to get a mortgage on a property approved, believe it or not, and it was very effective. So yes, the retention can charge the power of it. And at the time of release, if you focus the intent on the specific goal, that can definitely be used as a magical tool. Now, as far as abstinence, which, believe it or not, I've talked about before, that is a form of sex magic. Now, I personally don't practice or really care to fuck with that, but it is. There are some people on this path who really retain it and abstain. I'm not saying permanently, but for extended long periods of time. So that's another form of retention. So most definitely there is power in that if you understand the discipline and the properties of how it works. Now, you should never be doing it and you're torturing yourself. Then there's something not right there. Yes, it can be a little complex and hard because it does take discipline, especially if you're working a sex magic ritual. The discipline comes in where you have to be able to separate the pleasure from the actual intent of the ritual. Some can and cannot do that. So that can be a little bit difficult. And does it happen out the gate? No, because sometimes you get taken away in the lust, and that's not gonna make the ritual effective. It's just gonna really set off a nice sex session. That's about it. So yes, there is power in that. Good question. Yellow scent. All right, that's kind of a vague question. Can you tell us if you ever work with the great old ones or the elder gods? Of course. Who really is older when we talk about some of the gods such as Lucifer, right? What you can't even really put a time frame on some of these spirits or gods. Lilith, there's no birth record or origin of Lilith, right? We can go back even further than that. So not to just speculate, if you're referring to certain gods that you may be familiar with, maybe you can name some of them, and then I can be a little bit more specific with you. D.D. Wimley says, can you talk about the equivalent of Azrael, angel of death, and the Sumerian entities? What part of the conscious these entities represent? Well, you can look at the angel of death as manifested Santa Muerte, for an example, right? Great symbol of the Grim Reaper. Well, you gotta look at it. Whether you're now Azrael, that's more dealing with Kabbalah mysticism. And it depends on how you look at what that entity or being represents when it comes to death. I don't look at death as a bad thing. None of us on this path should look at it. Death is another state of transformation, growth, and evolution. How you know somebody's really connected to the death current is because they're growing and constantly changing spiritually, right? I said earlier, we're going to die many deaths in this life form, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. So there's that aspect of death. We don't just look at, I'm not saying that's why you asked the question, but we don't just look at death as physical death. That's not what these deities represent. Some think that, oh, the great Grim Reaper, they're coming to take me away. That's religion, and that's how religion promotes the angel of death as a bad thing. We don't look at Santa Muerte or any of these gateway deities that represent death. We look at them as a doorway to a greater state of consciousness, to a greater state of growth and evolution, that beyond that, comprehension. It's making that connection. That's why they're called gateway deities. That's why they bridge the gap between the physical and the spiritual abode, right? Now, as far as the Sumerian entities, it depends. I mean, you can mess with Babylonian and Sumerian magic, the Necronomicon, through Lovecraft's working, and connecting with a lot of those gateway deities, Marduk, Enki, and Enlil, Ninurta, working what they call some of the gods or goddesses of the underworld, right? Now, the underworld is just another convenient, polite term as saying the spiritual abode, or they refer to it also in Hermeticism as the necropolis, the abode of the dead, which I don't even like that term because really it's the abode of the eternal living, right? We say dead because we think this side we're on is living. You're not living. Think about it. You're closer to dying every day. From the moment you emerged from your mother's womb, you began to die, not live. See, they fucked that up. See, we think this is living, right? We're in a temporary state of existence, right? To get us to another bigger or greater state of existence. So ask yourself this: when you emerged, you were in water for 9 months in a sack, swimming around in water in the womb of your mother, which represents the great chaotic waters of Nun in ancient Egypt, right? You were living before you even set foot into this world. You were engulfed in the primordial chaotic energy, the primordial chaotic waters. And as soon as you came through, you began to die. Every day, that realm that we call death, or that abode we call death, is the doorway to a greater understanding, to a higher state of existence. And I'm using basic terms that people can connect with. So it just depends how you connect with the death current, how you look at it. I don't really mess or you really utilize the concept or archetype of the Azrael, because again, to me, that's more Kabbalah mysticism, and I'm not knocking if that's your thing, that's your thing. But these, they represent the conscious aspect of us that connect with transformation and change. That's how we should connect with it on a conscious level on this path. So when I'm in front of my Santa Muerte altar, that doesn't represent anything negative, gloom, or doom. Like an outsider would think, oh, why would you want to connect with all those Grim Reaper images and the skulls? And because that represents to me a greater, what some would call, again in simplistic terms, a greater afterlife, right? This is why the skull is such a prominent symbol on ritualistic altars. Not because, oh, it's so spooky and scary. No, because when we look at the skull, especially in necromancy rites, right? Sometimes we tap the skull with our dagger 3 times because it represents, it's personal to us, right? That represents that great state, abode, or existence of eternal life where we never die. We multiply colors. No, stop. I was thinking, oh, that shit just came to my mind. But anyway, you get the point. Hopefully that kind of helps you. Hopefully that shed some clarity. All right. All right. So Ad Astra says, how do I join the OTO? I'm 19. I've been on the Luciferian path for about a year now. Well, first and foremost, go step 1. Like my lodge here We actually have a couple in the state of Florida, but down here in Fort Lauderdale, we have actually a good OTO lodge. Now my membership is still active. I don't go like I used to for the last several years, but I stay in touch. But keep this in mind, or go to their main website, ordertemplariorientis.com. You could search by state. Step one would be find, I don't know which state you're in, but find, and most states have, you should have a local chapter or lodge there somewhere, I'm sure. But that would be step one. Go onto the Grand Lodge website, find the closest lodge to you, and attend a Gnostic Mass and a social night. They kind of almost do it like the Masons do it. They have every OTO lodge has once a month a public Gnostic Mass that's open to members and non-members. That would be a good start. And then find out when you go to the Gnostic Mass when they have their social night. Now, usually if you find a local lodge and they have a local website, usually that information is posted on there. And that usually is a good precursor to seeing if that's a path for you. Now, Thelema and working with, OTO and the teachings of Crowley, it's a conglomeration of a lot of things in the occult. But if that's your path and that's your interest and that's something you definitely want to pursue or look into, that's the best way. Find your local lodge, attend a public Gnostic Mass, and they all have a social night once a month. The social night is where they invite, or it's open for all who might be interested in becoming a member of the lodge. So that that's a good way to socialize, meet some people, check out the lodge, see if it's for you. Now, it's very similar to how the Masonic Lodge does it. They have social night. They have open dinners where you can bring a guest. And usually you got to get somebody to vouch for you. And that's a good way to find people that'll vouch for you. Because if you go to a few of those events, people get to know you and then they say, oh, this person's sincere. So that would be my advice to you. That's where I would start. All right. Jenny, caught the live. All right. Ad Astra, how do you see one's aura? There's actually, I don't know who it is. There's actually a ritual you can do for that. It involves a few implements. Email me. I'm not going to get into that here. I can actually send it to you. There is a ritual. There's a way you can do that. Not only see other individuals' auras, but see your own aura. It involves setting up a certain thing. There's a certain way to position lighting, and there's send me an email. That would be too long and drawn out and to get into, and I'll send you something that you could take a look at and actually do perform. All right. Sopor 777 says, I read that when you think of an entity, they are also thinking of you. That makes sense. Your awareness of them brings them into existence simultaneously. Could be. I think when, you might get that notion because when you're putting that thought out there, I can see it creating that type of awareness, that type of connection. So that could be, right? Liz says, your explanation make know thyself and you'll know the God so clear. It's my energy, but we connect to that external energy, but still all starts within. I'm getting it. Yeah. And again, Liz, and I think you brought this up one time in one of the classes, because I know you've taken a couple of private classes. There is an external aspect or experience to this. I'm not saying that. And I think that's where sometimes the confusion comes in when the first principle or Hermetic principle, all is mental, mental is all, the universe is mental, that it all comes from within. I think people get that confused because then they say, well, I had an experience and whether it was with an ancestral relative, or I saw this image of my grandmother, or I saw an image of Set, or Set appeared to me. And then they'll even go as far as saying, and he communicated with me and he was talking with me. That's not in question. I'm not saying that that's not happening, but we have to understand what was the trigger or the spark that manifested that. Everything that your subconscious mind, everything, let's start consciously, that you took in, everything, every book, image, experience that you read about Set, your mind stores it. Your subconscious is like the hard drive on a computer. It's like a sponge. it sucks up everything you expose it to, right? And that's why I said earlier when I was using the Kali example, did Kali or Set exist before you even knew anything about Kali or Set? Be careful how you answer that question. So really think about it. At some point, we were at an age earlier before we were on this path. There was a point in your life you didn't even know who Set was. You didn't even know what Set was, right? It could be the same thing with God. You were a certain age, whether if you were raised a Christian, before you became of age where somebody consciously sat you down and introduced this concept of a biblical God. Did God exist? To you, no, because you didn't know. But it existed because there were others prior to you that it existed too. But it's only as real to the person who embraces it as their reality. That's my whole point. So apply that same concept to when you come on this path and you start introducing yourself to all these new demons and spirits and archetypes and gods, right? Now you're aware of them. But the question is, before you were left-hand path, before you knew anything about Set or any of these gods, did they exist? Careful how you answer that. That's why I'm trying to say yes. And as you started to instill these things in your mind, you were creating, whether you're conscious of them, now the unconscious takes place because you're building and you're destroying simultaneously within the mind. So you're shaping and now creating these deities. Every image you see, the brain is storing those images in the subconscious mind. Now you have a visual. Then you start to read and study this what Set represents. Now you're giving him characteristics, life, persona, personality. And then once you've shaped and created it as a god or a goddess does on this path, it then manifests the way you created it. I don't care if you read, I don't care if it was influenced by what you read, what other people taught you, but you still created the concept of it through your understanding. And then you say, well, Set manifests. I did this ritual and he told me this and that. And then you describe, I saw him, he looked like this, he was wearing this. All of that comes back because that's all the stuff that you absorbed and you read. So who's doing the building, the creating, and the destroying simultaneously? It's you. So it doesn't mean there's not an external experience that takes place or creates the illusion that it's taking place outside of you. That's happening through your meditation, your vigil. How does that happen? Because when you tap into a certain vibrational frequency through meditation, visualization, through mantras, or just being locked into the frequency or energy of the ritual, you now, whether you're conscious of it or not, you kind of step outside of yourself. This is why if you understand what demonic integration is, when you do demonic integration work and you connect to your personal daemon or higher self, for those that have done the ritual, know the boogeyman that we always thought was in the room as a kid comes out in that ritual. We feel this presence emerge from us. Sometimes it creates these little goosebumps all up and down our back and on the back of our neck. They say the little hairs stand up, right? Think about how you spooked yourself out all them years when you were a little kid. We all did it at some point when we were in room playing hide and seek or whatever when we were kids and we were in a dark room, how we got spooked out. We thought the boogeyman was in the room, right? The boogeyman that's in the room is you. That's the real you that emerges in the silence and the darkness. I told you, through this, people have a hard time sitting in silence and darkness. Most people. I'm not talking about people on this path who have done the work. People struggle to sit in utter silence and darkness because their real thoughts emerge. The real you starts to come to the surface. You are your thoughts. And in that darkness and silence, some of the craziest shit can come to your mind. And it scares an individual because like, where the fuck is that coming from? Why am I thinking those things? Because you've been so programmed to block that out, the shadow self, right, as they call it, the real you, you've been taught to block it out because you've been programmed and indoctrinated with bullshit from the time you came out your mama's vagina. You were indoctrinated with religion. You were indoctrinated with the educational system. You were indoctrinated with society, etc. So when you're sitting in the silence, right, this will happen. At first, you might be sitting there in darkness and silence and start thinking about stupid shit like chicken and what I'm going to get ready to eat. Because the mind is wandering, looking for something. The conscious mind I'm talking about is wandering, looking for something to cling on to because it feels that unconscious coming through the subconscious and it's getting scared. So the conscious or the weak you is like, what can I be distracted with? And then all of a sudden, you might start thinking of crazy shit. You might start thinking of sexual stuff. You might start thinking of shit that you can't even figure out where it came from. That's the real you. You better get to understand that person, because that person holds the key to what you're really about, regardless of how it comes off to you. This is why we say one must go into the darkness to do the work of the light. You can't have real light or intellect if you have not been bathed and submerged in the darkness. Was not there very God in darkness when he said, let there be light, right? So what is that confirmation of? That God was in darkness, so darkness can't be a bad thing. Even God emerged from the darkness. So why we act like black and darkness is this evil, bad, horrible thing? That's because we've been programmed to believe that shit. Because religious dogmas have created this nonsense about, or created these stigmatas about these things. And then we get spooked out. I'm talking about people that are not on the path. All right? All right. But good question, Liz. Blade of Astaroth, In Draconian Consciousness by Michael Kelly writes, and it's a great book, by the way. I know you've heard me. I've used that. I've done classes on that book here on YouTube. I've suggested everybody should read and get that book. It's an awesome book. Michael Kelly writes, through the cosmos may be spawned from the dragon. They aren't bound by it and exist outside in the void, unlimited, chaotic, and timeless, right? Now, I'm glad you bring that up, because I'm going to be tapping into a little bit about that on the Patreon class on the 12th. Remember I said non-existence, the 4 anti-worlds and states of non-existence. You basically kind of, whether you were, I don't know if that was your intent, but you kind of tapped into it, okay? And you used it, and he uses the term there, outside in the void, unlimited. Outside. How can you be in the void and then be outside of the void? Think about it, though. You can. How can you be in the void and outside of the void? Well, if it's timeless and limitless and it has no parameters, no boundaries, beginning or end, the center is here, which is also there, and there, which is here. I know that sounds like a bunch of metaphysical mumble jumble, but it's not. Because what we think on a conscious physical level, that center, right? That's something we create, confound by person, place, or thing to get a visual. But the center of the void, when dealing with that concept, this is the center of my hand. The center could be here, the center could be here, and the center could be here. Why? Because there's no parameters. It's all the void, right? That's what you tap into on a subconscious level through your superconscious, right? Which is a term you'll see in, as I mentioned earlier, in psychiatry. And that's just another polite term to what we're talking about here, the void, or as they say, the citra akra, working with the klippa, the other side, right? It's just a word that they'll use in spirituality or psychology to describe that. It's just, again, as humans, we have to use terms that are confounded by three-dimensional things, person, places, or things, in our definition, so we can grasp the concept of these things. That's it. Yeah, and Dark Zen Taboo, it does go to this level, most definitely. And as Blade Astaroth says in the next comment, he writes, that is our heritage and our true home as draconian initiates. What would you say he means by this? Well, I didn't say that part, but what I just said. Now, obviously, there could be different levels of perception of that, but from studying that book intently, not more, not just one time, that's definitely what I got out of it. And it really, what that is that at that point, the initiate reaches the level of looking through the eye of Leviathan, right? Because when you're looking through the eye of Leviathan, right, and what Leviathan represents is the principle of continuity and existence, and you're seeing through the eye of Leviathan, you're basically now looking, you are the eye that's looking through the void, right? And he talks about that, I believe, in the 7th head, right? And you're now looking through the eye of Leviathan. What's Leviathan? Leviathan is the primal root source of all chaotic energy, right? That's what it represents. So you have embodied and become and are a manifestation of that because you've merged into it and become one, right? Not one in the center. Here's where it's going to get a little fucked up. In order to see the oneness, you had to separate from it. I keep telling people that. That's where the fluffy paths go wrong. They say, we're all one. Universe is one. We're all connected. That's true, right? We could talk that there's an aspect of that through the collective consciousness. But to see that togetherness, one must separate and look at it as an observer. And if you can't do that, you'll never understand what that really means. You might on the surface, oh yeah, well, we're all one, we're all connected, right? You got a general idea what that is, but the great watchers and observers, right? We hear that term. We are the ultimate observers and watchers. Why? Because we have separated ourselves from that. And we now look through the eye of the void, right? We don't look at it like we don't understand it. We don't look at it like we're swallowed up by the void. We're looking through the eye of Leviathan into the void now, because the void is a manifestation, or the abyss is a manifestation of that primordial chaotic energy, right? So now the great red dragon, right? And if you notice, the mentorship program on Patreon is called the Red Magus Mentorship Program. It's called that for a reason, because my goal and objective is to get you to the point where you look through the eye of Leviathan. That's the goal of the mentorship program. But everybody, I got to take through it differently, because everybody's going through different things in their life. Everybody has a different perception on their understanding and knowledge of what this path is about. So that's why the mentorship program is designed not for me to show you and influence my way of thinking or understanding of the path, but to show you the best way of how you need to harness your own power. Because my understanding by dialoguing and communicating with you through the program, it gives me an understanding of what dialogue and communication we need to have, so you can see your way through the void. Not my way, not somebody else's way, but your way through the void. That's what the mentorship program is about. So you kind of put some more on top of that. All right, that's a good question. Serpent-headed mask. How does one know? I'm gonna take a few more. I think one was at the bottom here. How does one know when, if they are ready to work with more intense deities like Sekhmet or Kali? Even if you have the understanding of what they represent, you've done work. Well, here's step one. You know when you don't even have to ask yourself if you're ready anymore, right? And let me explain. I always get an email. Do you think, or I'm not sure that I should do this ritual with such and such? Then don't do it. The very fact that you ask the question, I'm not talking about you, that people will ask a question, I'm not sure, I don't know if I'm ready. You're not ready. How you know you're ready is when you just dive right into it. You ain't got no doubt. You're not questioning. You're not overthinking. You're not saying, well, should I? You're not doing all these comparisons. You know you're ready when you just go, you know what? I'm about to do this ritual with Kali. And bam, you attack, you go head on. And it's this feeling you get. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, you have no fear. You 100% have embraced. You're ready to accept the results of what can manifest from that ritual, et cetera, et cetera. That's how you know. You just go into it without any doubtful thoughts. But if you ever go into it, you go, I'm going to do this. I'm not sure, but maybe such as I'm not sure. Maybe I should do it. But you know what I'm thinking? If you're doing all that shit, here's your answer. You're not ready. That's it. It's the best way I can describe it. Yes, Azazel and Hecate are part of the Glypathic energy and working with the Glypathic deities. Yes, there is a connection there, especially with Hecate. Now, Azazel, we refer to him on this path as the dark mystic. Remember, Azazel look at him as one of the great elders of this path, one of the great wise mystics who, remember, walks with the initiate through this path, because when you go back, whether it's the Al-Jilwa, the Black Book of the Yazidis, or you go back to the Enochian Gospel or the Enochian Keys or the Book of Enoch, remember, Azazel was the great rebeller in the sense that he showed people, they say the rebeller, but he showed people how to be their own individual. He is the great initiator on this path because he walks with the initiate as the initiate threads the path, especially as a neophyte, right? In the beginning stages, and walks through the entire path because he himself chose to be that nonconformist or rebel energy that was going to lay out his own path. So Azazel embraces the initiate that takes the intent to walk the path. And you will find he will manifest sometimes in your rituals when you're not even working with him through the whisper, right? You'll hear his voice in a whisper. There's many times he's intruded, not in a bad way, on my ritualistic work. And that's his way of letting you know the dark mystic walks with you. He is guiding you through the path because you have taken the same intent that he took and was criticized for and ostracized for, but was willing to embrace the shit that came along with it because he knew it was the right thing to do. He didn't want to be a conformist. He didn't want nobody telling him what he could and could not do. When you read the story, that's us. We take on the role of Azazel when we make the intent to walk the path. Okay? So yes, the Azazel and the Hecate, which bridges the above and below concept, and that's just a concept, as I said, it's not literal. It's bridging our lack of understanding of those realms, right? Our tri-crone aspect as a goddess, right? The underworld, the three-dimensional abode that we live in, and then those planes that are interwoven around that. Hecate emerges that. That's why when you do telepathic work with her, she is swept with the above and the below. When you're working with the cardinal points, you're dealing with Belial in the east. You're dealing with Lilith with the above, Hecate with the below, right? You're dealing with Set in the south, etc. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. There's reasons because that's symbolic of the cardinal points. And yes, those energies are connected to this path, most definitely. Jinjini, yes. Can working with certain currents help to relieve chronic pain conditions? Yes, a great path with that is Egyptian Heka. And if you're looking for work with that, there's a book which is the workings of Charles Pace that Michael W. Ford reproduced. It's called the Necrominion, not Necronomicon, not the Necrominion. And it's all, Charles Pace considered himself a high priest of Set. And all his work is centered on working a Heka and Egyptian magic, but there's a lot of healing rituals in that book. It's a great book. So if you're looking for work for that, I'd suggest that book for you. Okay. What else we got? Josh Boss. I don't know who the hater that gave a dislike. I really couldn't care. There's always one. You can't please everybody. So who cares? But you know how that go. You can't please everybody. All right, what else we got? We knew. Yeah, you must have came in. You must have came in on the semen retention part. Yeah, it happens. There are scattered. Do I have a specific video, RVDJ, on psychedelic medicine? No, I have talked about the ayahuasca. I have talked about the DMT molecule, how to activate it. It's scattered through many videos. There might be one, I think there might be one on there titled how to activate the DMT through psychedelics and naturally. I did a whole video on how to do it both ways. Can't remember the title, but I'm going to say if you go back when you get some time through the channel archives, I'm going to say it was about maybe a year to a year and a half ago, if I can remember. But it's there. But I have talked about it scattered through many videos. Okay. But if you get some time, go back through the archives. I'm sure you'll see it. That's a good question, by support. Do you think science will one day catch up with all this, for example, extending its reach to the astral plane and eventually taking away its mystical nature and making it common like gravity? Well, I've always been a firm believer that this path is spiritual science. I think it's a combination of both. I think that's happening, but it's happening on an individual level. Will it happen collectively? It can, but I think people individually, there are some people there who have that kind of level of understanding. And I've always said, going back many years, that this path incorporates, in my opinion, science with spirituality, and that's why it's a great path. But I think a lot of it boils down to the individual's perspective and their understanding. I do think we're seeing that slowly happening, right in front of our eyes. I do think. Is it there? I mean, has science caught up with all of it? I probably would have to say no. But is it happening in stages? I think it's happening. That's just my perspective, my opinion, because it depends on what eyes you're looking at it through. But it's a good point. I think it is happening as we speak. Gerald, good question. What tips can you give to survive the cliff? Make it sound so brutal. Is it like a Masonic initiation to deal with? Yeah, I think it's a little more intense because it's a very deep, personal, intense, and it's a continual initiation. I don't think you're really ever done working with the clip hop because there's so many different levels and methods to connect with it. Like the differences when you're going through your Masonic degrees. You know, you go through the blue house, you get your 3 degrees on the blue house, then some go through the red house or the arch degrees. And then some people bridge and continue their path through the York or the Scottish Rite. But once you get to that 32nd, if you ain't invited to that 33rd, which has to be by invitation only, your journey is pretty much done. The difference is it's never done on this path. It's just being consistent. If you're willing to commit, outside of talking about all the intense and difficult stuff to good, it's a great rewarding path. Let's not forget the great benefits and rewards after the hard work is put in, right? And nothing that, without hard work being done in anything in life, you don't get any rewards. But let's not forget there are great rewards on this path. Let's not always, and I'm not saying that's I'm just speaking in general now. Let's not forget there are great rewards. When you work and navigate your way through this path, don't forget of the great rewards that come afterward. Not some, pie in the sky reward. I'm talking about the great results that manifest in your daily life. When you could look back and go, damn, I did that. I accomplished that. How? By the work, effort, and energy that I put in. So let's not forget that. But yes, it's a continual journey is the best way I can describe it. All right. What is the science behind spell work and how it works? And do you have any experiences with it? Yes. Spell work. Let me be clear on this. Over the years, let me give you an example. People always come for love spell work, which I try to actually talk people out of in the beginning. For an example, I always ask a person if somebody reaches out to me and say they want to do spell work to get somebody back, right? I always ask them before, why do you want this person back that doesn't want you? And then usually it's which they're not conscious of, is usually a lot of insecurity shit. Because I, years ago, got myself to a point, I don't want anybody that doesn't want me, period. I'm not interested. And I can turn it off like that. I mean, literally like that, no connection. A lot of people can't do that. A lot of people are trapped in their emotions, they're insecure, and they cave into their fears. The problem is when you do spell work, you got to remember, you're getting a shell of the person back. So what people fail to understand, when you're sending, say, you're using tranquil spirits, or you're using a spirit to bind that person mentally to control them, okay? Remember, what you're getting in return is a shell of the original person you had. So let me give you an example. If you were in a relationship and you cherished, the things you guys did for many years, and there was all these times that you had and ways that you did things, that's necessarily not going to be the same, because then people will notice, yeah, I got the person back, but they seem a little bit different. They are, because when a person has a target and they're doing spell work on an individual, remember they have the skill and the ability, because that person's mind is weak and susceptible and can be controlled, and it's being controlled through thought pattern forms of thoughts that are being sent to the individual. So you're getting a shell of that person back. Some people don't understand that. And then some people don't realize it might even be harder to keep that person the second time. They think because they got the person back, that's it. They don't have to do anything. No, usually there's more maintenance work that needs to be continually done. It's a lot of fuckery and it's a lot of work. And some people will go to the limits to do it. And that's fine. That's personal choice. But I actually try to talk people out of doing shit like that. I'd rather talk a person into moving forward on with their life and looking for bigger and better things. Why do you want to take a step back and bring stagnated energy back into your domain? People do it, but I try to encourage people not to do it. So spell work, it just depends, one, on the spirits that you're working with. What is the spell for? Is it a destructive spell? Is it a love spell? But the target has to be prepared right, and it has to be a candidate. And what I say as a candidate, usually a good ripe target is somebody who is not in tune with the spiritual world at all. They're your easy targets. Now, if you're doing spell ritual work on somebody who is strong on the path, that could backfire on you. Because if they get wind of it, and if they're really spiritually inclined to it, and people have tried that shit, and I've seen that be reversed, and that can blow up in your face. So one, you need to be really educated and conscious of your target. Do you have the ability and power, and are you much stronger than your target? Excuse me. And if you're not, you might want to rethink that. So there's a lot of dynamics that go into spell work. Okay. And I've always said this, I don't really have to utilize a lot of that stuff, because when you are in control of your spiritual path, like I said, if you're always doing spell work and protection work and destruction work on something or somebody, then something's wrong with you. If you constantly feel like you're being attacked, or you got to do shit like that to control people. Now there's certain situations where it needs to be done. Don't get me wrong, but I could probably count on one hand how many times I've actually had to do that. Because I think if you're a skilled magician, you know what you're doing. You don't even bring any of that shit into your domain, your energy. And nobody's going to really want to fuck with you. And look, I stay in my lane. I don't go looking to fuck with nobody, but I will not hesitate if somebody even attempts to fuck with me. Believe me, if need be, if I got to do something, I'm going to do it. But it has to be, the right scenario. All right, so Kiana says, what are your thoughts of those who are naturally aware of themselves, but was caught in the trappings of the world, but the mind didn't sleep, and yet eventually put in the backseat? I mean, they got to go through their experiences. I'm not judgmental of anybody that's in that state. Sometimes I've seen people become conscious and alert on the path, and then I've seen them fall back into doing stupid shit they were doing, or even worse. Look, you can't help or save everybody. That's just the reality, and not everybody's going to embrace this. And bottom line is this: you got to take care of yourself first, and those who are supposed to be in your environment and surroundings or on this path, you'll connect with like minds. Some of those people that happens to, they weren't meant to be here, and then there's many reasons why they fell back or went back to doing what they were doing. They either got scared, spooked out, or it just wasn't for them. And that's just how you got to look at it. All right. All right. I'm going to have to stop there. I got to wrap this up. I got a few things I need to do. Hopefully I got to most of you guys' questions. Anyway, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, if you need to reach me for any of the aforementioned things, don't forget, check out the Patreon page, patreon.com/Beniti. If you need to reach me for a spiritual reading or a consultation, shoot me an email. Let me know the days and times you are available, and I will get back to you and set something up. Remember, class on the 3rd, the path of the Egyptian vampire, ancient Egyptian vampire, from 3 to 6:30. That class information to sign up for that is on the Primordial Chaos Instagram page. We got that coming up on the 3rd, and the Patreon events. Anyway, you know where to reach me. Emails in the description box. We will talk soon. Infernal blessings to all.